Hello, I'm Oded Grober, and welcome to the Social Blog. Today's show will focus on alternative journalism. Around the world, the mainstream press is struggling. Journalistic institutions that were once highly respected have been tainted with branded content and taken over by media moguls with personal agendas. It's only natural that independent journalists, bloggers, even Twitter has become the alternative news source for millions. The question is, what are the implications of all these alternative news sources? So that's exactly what we'll be discussing today. Let's go to the studio then and meet our guests. And we're joined today by two guests, Elis, the Jerusalem Post business reporter, and Haggai, Matar, journalist at Plus 972 magazine and Local Call. Thank you both for coming in. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having us.
So tell me a little bit about your experience as journalists, whether in the mainstream media or independent news sources. Let's begin with you, Niv.
I didn't start as a journalist. I actually studied international affairs and economy and sort of got into journalism as a means of participating in that conversation about the policies in the world around us. And I have to say, I had experiences in sort of bigger papers. I interned with Forbes magazine before I eventually became the reporter at the Jerusalem Post. And in these papers, it's always been great to have that name behind you. And, in between, I also was like a blogger and worked for a kind of a more alternative magazine. And, you try to get people on the phone, you try to get people in interviews then, and
Nobody calls you back.
Yeah, you're calling from where?
So is somebody calling you back, Haggai?
Yes, people are, though not as much. I can say I started out in Ma'ariv, once the biggest paper in Israel, that recently crashed. And with hundreds of journalists on the streets, I found myself in alternative media working for Local Call 972 magazine.
Right, and the difference is, I would assume, felt.
It is quite a difference. And there's the hardships that you just mentioned, but then again, there's also a new kind of freedom. You can do more or less whatever you want. Of course, keeping to journalistic standards, keeping to journalistic ethics. It doesn't mean that you abandon all that, but you can still do things that are, more the things that interest you.
Yeah, well, we'll delve more into this a little later, but let's get started with today's portrait by Yael Gaaton, who went to visit two independent online news ventures created and run by veteran journalists. One side is left-wing, one right-wing, but ultimately both have the same goal: to publish news that pushes their agenda and that provides an alternative to the mainstream press.
The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality.
The hottest place in hell is an independent magazine that focuses on social issues. It has a clear socioeconomic left-wing agenda.
Inat is also the chief correspondent of the site.
Irit is the editor-in-chief.
What is Midah? Midah is a worldview. We have full set, ideological set that doesn't exist anywhere else. We're like Republicans. We're the Republican Party. And in Israel, there's no real newspaper outlet that gives you that kind of complete set.
Did you hear about the attack?
Okay, there's a new interior minister.
Wednesday.
So tomorrow I'm going to do it this way?
Long working hours, a chronic lack of fixed budgets, and a strong agenda. The criteria for creating a successful and professional alternative news site is challenging. While difficult, it has an important and decisive role to play. When the watchdog of democracy struggles to do its job, these sites take its place, and they bite hard.
We publish investigations in the field of security, governance, that you can't find in mainstream news sites like Ynet, Walla, or even NRG.
We didn't establish this place to remain neutral. We came here to do the kind of journalism we believe in, provocative journalism with an agenda that's free and independent.
Whether they have a left-wing agenda or right, these alternative sites explore content that can't be found anywhere else.
We followed 7 people who live in minimum wage in Israel. We posted a profile of each of them, and every day they posted personal stories about their lives.
We translated and published an essay by a professor called Pinker about why academics write so poorly. In his words, why does academic writing stink? And this is something no one else would do.
It remains to be seen if an alternative independent press is economically feasible without marketing content or sponsorship of some kind. But in the last 2 years, these sites have generated a wide audience, both from readers and the mainstream press itself.
Each of us have worked in many different news organizations.
Both of us have decades of experience fighting for change, trying to spread our message through the mainstream media, and now is a rare moment in history that we've been able to create for ourselves and many other people.
In my age, it's either this or hang your hat and fade away, write for encyclopedias, or alternatively, march on, go into 5th gear, and step on the gas.
All right, so it's no secret that the mainstream media is struggling these days. Journalism is not such a safe haven. As people who are working in the field, is it really that bad, or is it a little exaggerated?
I think that when people say that journalism is dying, then they're exaggerating. Journalism is changing, it's transforming, and it's getting leaner. And the advent of the internet, social media, and a generation of people that are reading their news on the internet instead of getting it from the TV or the newspaper is changing the way that people consume it, and it has to change the way that people write it. So at the end of the day, it's really about finding a new business model and something that can feed it. You know, this has always been the struggle for papers, though.
Yeah, but the content also changes. I mean, it's not just the way you present it, it's what you bring to the table and what hidden agendas might be behind it.
Definitely. I think the economic crisis, the general crisis and the one in the media specifically, is causing that change because the media is becoming more and more dependent on the capitalist that owns the specific media that you work in. Journalists feel that their work is much more precarious, that they don't know if they'll be there the next month or the following. And when you can be fired at any given moment, you want to kind of adapt to what your boss expects you to do. And so the chances of your being critical are, declining.
So could ventures like The Hottest Place in Hell and Midah could be the solution? Is it feasible? Do you think it'll hold?
It depends if they get an audience, and it's not just about getting an audience because you have to convert that audience into money. I mean, these people might have an agenda, and that's fine, especially if it's out there and it's clear that they have an agenda. But if they're not turning those eyeballs on the webpage into shekels, then they're not going to be able to survive.
There is another solution. I mean, we've seen in the past in Israel, Tomer Avital, he raised money from crowdfunding. He raised, I think, nearly $30,000 for 100 days of transparency, where he hired private investigators to follow members of Knesset and see what they're doing. Is that journalism, or is that more of a gimmick?
I think, well, that specifically is one gimmick that has journalistic qualities and might have a journalistic potential. I think the interesting thing is that people are willing to pay for very specific events or very specific reporters. You can see how people would be willing to contribute to a certain blog because they know that that blog publishes the thing that they believe in. So the act of consuming and paying for journalism is becoming not paying for a wide product that gives you many opinions and news coverage and so on, because you can get that free. And if you, what you pay for is the person that you believe in.
You're also seeing some other things where, like, Jeff Bezos of Amazon is buying the Washington Post. One of the founders of Facebook, Chris Hughes, bought the New Republic, where people with money are coming in and saying, well, we need to find a way to give money to mainstream journalism in order to keep it alive because it's important. And sites like BuzzFeed that have articles about kittens and funny videos are actually also hiring really great reporters to do long-form reporting. So that's an interesting change also.
All right, that leads us to today's post by Marie Semlin about news information on the internet. Let's take a look.
In the U.S. say the internet has become the second source of news information after TV, and in Europe too, it's growing fast. On the web, it's hard to differentiate verified facts from rumors. Info can be posted by a blogger on Twitter or a website, and if it's false, no big deal, they can always correct it later. A great example comes from Banksy. The infamous artist is always apparently arrested. This year, the rumor was launched by the parody news site National Report, and then seriously reported by many others. Bashar al-Assad was also assassinated last year when several websites announced he was killed by one of his bodyguards. But rest assured, he is very much alive. To attack this problem, European universities have been working on the Theme Project, a real-time lie detector for social media, which will be able to automatically identify information as fact or rumor using a special algorithm which will categorize info as speculation, controversy, false information, or disinformation. But the news on the web isn't all bad, and new forms of journalism with new economic models are developing. These models can work, as was proven by the Pulitzer Prize-winning nonprofit foundation ProPublica for an investigation about New Orleans hospitals after Katrina. The independent nonprofit newsroom is financed by private funders. So when it comes to alternative news, the web is capable of both the worst and the best.
All right, so let's talk about the internet and digital news. Among the millennial generation, the internet has become their #1 source for news. And even among those 30 to 49, 63% say the internet is where they go to get most of their news. Meanwhile, according to a study from the Pew Research Center, about 30% of adults in the United States get their news on Facebook. A recent piece in the New York Times reported about the team of Facebook programmers that create the algorithm which decides which news posts you'll see, which you won't see. So it's like they've become the new news editors, in a way.
Yeah, but social media is definitely becoming a part of mainstream media. There's no question that as part of your job as a journalist, you have to be active on Twitter, you have to be active on Facebook, and not only do you get ideas, you have conversations, and you see things. The problem is that you have to go and figure out what's fact and what's rumor. But I think that one of the reasons that Twitter work is that if you're following people that know what they're talking about, a lot of times those are reporters at mainstream sites.
It can get you started, but it can't be the whole thing. And we see sometimes that it's hard to differentiate between people who are tweeting ideas, thoughts, rumors, and hard news.
But you still have those basic journalistic tools. You hear a rumor, you call a person, you try to verify. I mean, these are things that the internet cannot change. I mean, you might tweet at someone and ask a question instead of calling, but doing that basic work of trying to figure things out, trying to find reliable sources that are beyond rumor is something that you can do with the internet just as well.
Yeah, but the lines are getting blurry. I mean, when you sit down to write a post on Facebook, or when you sit down to write a blog post or a tweet, do you approach it differently?
Absolutely. I think that there's different approaches for different mediums. On Twitter, I feel free to throw my opinion in a lot more and sort of say, oh, this is a terrible piece of news, or this is a great piece of news, or whatever it is that I think. Whereas when I'm writing an article that I know is going to be presented to someone as an objective thing, I want to say, well, here are the two sides, and you figure it out.
Okay.
Whereas in independent media, almost everything you write is with your agenda, and it's very personal. And still, I would always be more careful with what I write in a post, that people go in to get news and to get information, even though it has my agenda in it, than with what I would write on Facebook, which can be just about anything.
Yeah. All right. Finally, let's take a quick look at this report from Oxford University study about recent news trends, like how journalists are becoming their own brands. Here it is.
One final trend that emerges is of journalists beginning to rival traditional news brands as key drivers of trust, engagement, and consumer loyalty. This is partly encouraged by the nature of social media, which is driven by strong personalities. Almost half of news users on Twitter in the UK are following a journalist account, and we see that in some countries like Spain, France, and the US, the reporter is driving around as much trust as the brand itself.
So we mentioned this earlier. I guess as journalists, you're in favor of this trend?
It does give you a certain advantage. It means that if you do good work, that you have career options, that people will say, well, it's not just, say, the Jerusalem Post that's good, it's you, the reporter, that's good, and maybe that's going to give you job opportunities in the future. On the other hand, it gives you an extra piece of pressure of what your job consists of, it means that you don't just sit and write articles and spend your time focusing on that. You have to spread your time between being on social media and going on TV shows.
Right.
Being your own PR, being
Yeah.
your own PR person. But I think one of the main problems with this growing effect of internet, and especially Facebook, as you said, with people being their own editors or the algorithm being their editor, is that it's creating kind of an echo box wherein people only get the kind of news that they want to hear, that their friends are talking about, and so on. And
It's not challenging enough.
Not only that, one of the aims and goals, I think, of media and journalism is to create kind of a common base of knowledge, that everybody in society knows that if we're having a political debate, we all know the same thing because we read the same paper or we saw the same TV show.
Right.
And when people consume news only through Facebook, the only kind of news they get is the one that their friends are seeing. So it's destroying social dialogue in a sense, because only 100 people have the same base of knowledge because they read the same thing.
Yeah, there's the idea of you can have your own opinions but not your own facts, and now people do have their own facts.
All right, we're out of time, unfortunately, so we're not going to be able to solve that problem just yet, but I want to thank you, Niv and Haggai, for coming in today and sharing your thoughts with us. I want to thank you at home for joining us as well. It was a pleasure, and it will be again next week, so be sure to join us again.